Hello guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's Royalty Cut here, and in today's tutorial we'll be learning how to make a one sleeve or a mono sleeve flared dress. If this is a video you're interested in, please keep on watching. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and also turn on your notification bell to be notified whenever we post a new video. So technically for this tutorial, these are the materials that I'll be making use of. So I have about 3 yards of African print, 3 yards of Ankara over here, and I also have 1 yard of a lining. I have a black matching zipper for this dress, and I also have a black SD. Now this is the material I'll be making use of. Now for the drafting of this dress that we are making, we'll be cutting the flay, that's the down piece of this dress first. Now if you're a tailor or a seamstress and you're making any dress that has a flay, don't ever make the mistake of cutting your upper body first. If not, your material will mess you up if it's not big enough. So for you to avoid that, just make sure you actually cut your flay pattern first, then whatever things you are left with, just go ahead and manage it for your upper body. So for this, I'm just going to go ahead and fold this fabric in a triangular shape, just like you want to cut your normal flay pattern. So I went ahead to place it on a triangular shape. Now make sure that the shorter part is facing upward for you to be able to know where your fabric stops. So after folding it, when looking at the photo we have at our thumbnail, you will notice that the down part is not a flay all through. Like from the waist to about 12 inches is a flay. Then from the 12 inches, it's just a straight gathered something that was attached to it. So basically that is what we'll be doing. So we are going to go ahead and fold this. Now the round waist measurement that I'm working with is 32 inches. 32 inches divided by 4 is 8 inches. So from this point that I already folded, I'm just going to go ahead and measure from this folded edge. I will measure in 8 inches, but for me I'll be adding extra 1 inch allowance for the sewing. So instead of marking 8 inches, I'll be looking for where 9 inches went into, and I have 9 inch here. So I'll go ahead and mark it down. So after marking it from the upper point of this place, I'll go and see where this line that I marked stopped, and I have about 11 inches. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark 11.5 inches. Sorry, it was 11.5. So I'll mark 11.5 inches all the way. Now the purpose of marking this 11.5 inches is to avoid the waist area from being straight. We want to give it a curvy part, so just go ahead and mark 11.5 inches all the way after measuring yours. So after measuring it, this is what it's looking like. As you can see, it's no longer looking straight the way it was looking before. So after that, we are not actually going to be imputing our whole full length on this flip part, just like I explained earlier. So for the upper, the first layer of our skirt for the dress, I will be doing 14 inches, but for me the full length of the skirt that I'm working with is 35 inches. So you can choose to make yours to be bigger or lesser, but looking at the photo, I think the first layer is shorter than the second layer. So for me, I'll be doing 14 inches in total, but I'll be adding half inch for joining it to the next layer we have. So I'll be doing 14.5 inches in total. So I'll just go ahead and mark 14.5 inches from this waistline measurement that we have already. So after marking it down, this is what I have left. So the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do is to cut out this shape that we have. After cutting out the first layer of our skirt, I'm going to go ahead and fold the fabric again for us to cover, for us to cut the back piece. Now for the back piece of this skirt, just note that it's going to be having a zipper, so we'll just go ahead and attach extra 1 inch from the open edge for our zipper allowance. So I folded my fabric again into two. So I'll go ahead to place this front piece that we have already. So remember I said you should give about 1 inch from the center that will be serving as our zipper allowance. So from this point I have 1 inch here, so I'm just going to go ahead and cut everything else to be equal, then after which I will notch the center of this 1 inch and slit open this back piece, because the back piece will be on a separate form. Cutting it out, this is what the upper body is looking like. So this is our front piece, and our back piece is in two different parts. So we are going to go ahead and place this at side. Now for the second layer of our skirt, we are just going to go ahead and cut a very long rectangular shape fabric. So you just have to make sure that it is very long. Now remember that for the upper piece that we had, we subtracted 14 inches away from our skirt length. Now remember we are working with 38 inches in total. So we subtracted 16 inches for our upper body, so 16 inches is gone. Then we also subtracted 14 inches away from it. So 36 inches minus 16 minus 14. The 16 is for the upper body, the 14 is for the upper layer. So whatever thing you get, that will be the length of the fabric you'll be working with. Now for me, I have about 8 extra inches left, but I'll go ahead and be adding extra 3 inch to the normal inch that we have. Now the purpose of this extra 3 inch is in case of if it's a little bit shorter for you, you can go ahead and trim it off, or you usually use the 3 inches for the folding. So for me, I'm just going to add extra 3 inches to it, making it 11 inches in total for this second layer. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark 11 inches all the way to the quantity I want the fabric to be, because we are going to be gathering it. We are going to be attaching gathers to it. So you want your fabric to be as long as possible. So I'll just go ahead to measure it all the way down. So after cutting out my own second layer of our skirt, let me measure the length that I have in case of if you want to use the exact length I have. So I have about, I have about 70, I have 88 inches by length. That's what I actually had to cut out. Now the length you're going to be cutting out, remember it shouldn't be the exact length of your round upper layer skirt after joining it. Remember, it's a flay, so you want it to be more longer or more wider than your upper layer for you to be able to gather some and get your pleat if you want it to be pleated. So I'm just going to go ahead and place this aside. So for the upper body of this dress that we are making, it's not a normal body pattern. If you look closely, you notice that it is a bustier body pattern. So the first thing we are going to go ahead and do now is to draft this. Then after drafting the upper body, we'll go ahead and cut it directly on our fabric. Now for the first thing I'm just going to go ahead and do right now is to tell you the measurements that we'll be needing for this upper body. Now for the measurement, you will be needing your bust length, that's from your shoulder to your bust. You will also be needing your under bust length, that's from your shoulder to your under bust. You also be needing your back, your waist length from your shoulder to the waist. You will need your round bust. your round under bust, then your round waist measurement. So these are technically the four measurements or five measurements that we will be needing. So the first thing I'm just going to go ahead and do right now is to mark out a point that will be serving as our shoulder line. So this will be serving as our shoulder line, and my paper is on fold. So any measurement I'm taking from will be starting from this folded edge. So after marking my shoulder line, I'm going to go ahead and input the length measurement. From the shoulder length, from the shoulder line, I'm going to go ahead and mark my bust length. Now the bust length I'm working with is 10 inches. I'll go ahead and mark it. The under bust length that I'm working with is 13.5 inches. You go ahead and mark it. And the waist length that I'm working with is 16 inches. So I'll go ahead and mark extra half inch that will be serving as our sewing allowance. And I'll go ahead and extend the line all the way down. So after marking these lines out, I'll just go ahead and impute it so that we'll know this is our bust length, this is our under bust length measurement, this is our waist length, and this is our allowance line. So after marking that, the next thing I'm just going to go ahead and do now. Sorry, I didn't mention that you'll be adding your nipple to nipple measurement, which will be serving as our bust span. So go ahead and measure the nipple to nipple measurement you're working with. So for me, I'm working with 7 inches. From the right nipple to the left nipple is 7 inches. So I'll go ahead and divide the 7 inches into two, which will be giving me 3.5 inches. So from this folded edge, I'm going to go ahead and impute the bust span. The bust span is your nipple to nipple measurement divided by 2. So I will impute it on both the bust length line, the under bust length line, the waist length line, the allowance line, and I'll also impute it on our shoulder line. So after marking my bust span line on this paper, now the next thing I'm just going to go ahead and do is to come out by half inch on our on the bust line. So I'm going to come out from this point by half of an inch and also come out on our waistline by half of an inch. Now this half of an inch is constant for everybody. You get, is constant. Now, after marking the half of an inch, I'm just going to go out and I'm just going to go ahead on the under bust length. I'm going to go out by half of an inch. So on the under bust length and the waistline, I went in by half of an inch, while on the bust length, I'm going to go out by half of an inch. So I've marked the half of an inch. Now the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do right now is to connect this half of an inch that I marked on the bust length in a slanted way. I'm going to connect it back to this half of an inch that I have in our on our bust length, just like you see me do over here. Now I've connected that. So after marking the half of an inch together, the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do now is to get my cup size. Now for the cup size, for a small size breast, you can either use 1.75 or 2 inch for your cup size. Then an average person can use 2.25. Then if you're too busty, you can use 3 inches for your cup size. Now remember that the cup size does not determine how big you are, but it determines the flesh you have on your bust. Now the next thing I'm going to do now is to input the cup size, just like I told you. Now the cup size that I will be working with is 2.25. So from this bust span line, I'm going to measure in 2.25 at this spot, and I'm going to mark that down. Now before we go ahead to connect it, the next thing I'm going to do now is to, from this bust span line, I'm going to connect it back into this half of an inch, just like you see me do here. Now after that, I'm going to connect this 2.25 inch that I have here into this half of an inch line too. I don't know if you can see. Now I'm not going to be using a straight part of my ruler. I'm going to be using this curvy part. But if you don't have a ruler, you can go ahead and use your free hand. Just make sure that it is not straight. Now, after covering that out, I'm also going to go ahead and impute the cup size that I'm working with on our under bust length and also on our waist length. Now, remember I'm working with 2.25. So I'll go ahead and mark it starting from this bust span. I'll mark 2.25 here, and I'll also mark it on our waistline, and I'll be connecting the line in a straight form. Now after connecting that, this is what it's looking like. Now I'm going to use the curvy part of my ruler, just like you see me do here. I'm going to connect this cup size that I have here in a curvy way back to this half of an inch that I have at our bust length. Now look at the way I am placing my ruler. Just make sure it is in a kind of a U shape or a curved shape. So this is what it should be looking like. I don't know if you can see, and that is that for the bust size. Now let's go over to our neck area. Now I'll be working with, it determines how wide you want your neck to be. Remember, we are going to be slanting out one arm. So the more down you go, the more revealing it's going to be. So I'll be working with 3-inch width, and I'll also be working with 3 inch of depth. So I'm just going to go ahead and use my curve ruler to connect it. So after that, the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do now is to measure this, is to measure from this point to this point. Remember that it is 2.25, that is our cup size. Now our shoulder measurement is 16 inches. 16 inches divided by 2 is actually 8 inches. So let's just go ahead and mark the 8 inch on our shoulder line. Now remember that we already have 2.25 inches here that will be going out while cutting this. So after marking your shoulder measurement here divided by 2 on this line, make sure you replace whatever cup size that you have here, replace it back to the shoulder. So I have 2.25 here. I'm going to go ahead and measuring 2.25 too. So here is where our new armhole will be starting from. So I'm just going to go ahead and extend the line all together. So I have about 10.5 inch here. So I'll go ahead and mark 10.5 inch. Now our armpit measurement, armhole measurement is also 16 inches. 16 inches divided by 2 is 8 inches. So I'll go ahead and mark it and extend the line. After extending the line, I'm going to come down by 1 inch for our shoulder slope from the shoulder line. Divide the rest into 2, which is 3.5. At the point I have the 3.5, I'm going to come out by half of an inch. So this shoulder slope, I'll be connecting it back to our neck width. Then from the 1 inch, I'll be connecting it to this half of an inch that I have over here. Then after that, I'm going to go ahead and divide my round bust measurement into 4. I'm working with round but 36 inches. 36 inches divided by 4 will give me 9 inches. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark 9 inches from this point. So I have 9 inches here. Now remember that we're also going to be subtracting something away from here. So I'll just go ahead and measure what we have here. I have about um I have about 0.75 here. So I'm just going to go ahead and replace it. And I'll be adding the extra allowance that I'll be working with, be it 3 inches or 4 inches. So for me, I would want to add an excess allowance, so I'll be doing 3 inches instead. So I'm just going to go ahead and curve this in to get our armhole. Armhole is ready. Now the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do now is to impute our dart measurement. Now the dart that we are working with is going to be an invisible dart. So we are going to actually do it on our pattern paper. So for the dart measurement, I'll go in at our bust length. I will impute the round bust measurement divided by 4, which is 9 inches. So I'll go ahead and mark 9 inches here. Now remember, we are not going to replace whatever thing it is that we have here. So at this point I marked the 9 inch, I'm going to come down by 1 inch. So I'm just going to slant this 1 inch line I have here all the way to this tip of the joining that I have. So that is for our that. Now we'll be covering this up at the end of the day. Now for the body measurements, you go ahead to use your biggest round body measurements for it. So for me, the biggest round body measurement here that I'm working with is my round bust. But instead of that, I'll be working with the under bust. I'll be working with the waist length round measurement. Now I'm working with waist 32. 32 divided by 4 is 8 inches. So at this point, I'm just going to mark the 8 inch. Now I'll go ahead to measure this part that will be leaving our drawing paper. So I have about 2.75. I'm going to go ahead and replace the 2.75 here. And I'll be adding extra 3-inch allowance for our sewing. So after that, I'm just going to go ahead and connect the lines together. So after that, I'm just going to go ahead and cut this out. So after cutting this out, this is what we are left with. Now opening this up, we'll be joining it to the sides just like you see over here. So this is what is to be looking like. Now after that, I'm just going to go ahead right now to place this on our piece, the material we are working with, and I will be cutting it. But before cutting, I'll be adding half of an inch to all these parts that I will be joining together. So from here, I'll be adding half of an inch to the main fabric. From here, half of an inch, then half of an inch for the joining. So that is it for our front piece. Now we are just going to go ahead and draft out the back piece. Now the back piece will be drafting it directly on our fabric because it's just the basic back piece pattern that you know. So I'm just going to go ahead and fold my fabric now for us to cut the front piece on our fabric. Now this material is actually on fold, just as you can see. So I'm just going to go ahead and bring our upper body front piece. Now this center part should be on fold, so anything you're going to be doing, just make sure that you fold enough that will be able to actually place at the center of our fabric, not to slit it. So for this, rather than wasting this part, I'll be making use of it to actually turn on this part. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut this. So I'm going to go ahead and place this aside. Now for the center, I'm just going to go ahead and fold another piece for us to cut the center area. Also remember to add half of an inch all the way here for the stitching allowance. I have the center piece here already. So I'm just going to go ahead and use this particular front piece fabric to cut out our lining piece, exactly the same way we did for this. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And after that, I'll be attaching hairstay to this. I'll be attaching two layers of hairstay to it to give it a little firmness. So if you have a wording too that you want to attach at the cup area, you can also go ahead. But for me, I'll be attaching only an hairstay to this. Now let's go ahead and cut the back piece. So for the back piece of this top, I went ahead to fold my fabric into two. This is my fabric here and it's already into two. So the first thing I'm going to go ahead and do now is to impute 1 inch for our zipper allowance. Now before that, I'm just going to go ahead and measure the waist length that we are working with. And remember, we are working with 16 inches. And also don't forget to add extra half of an inch to it for the joining. So I'm just going to mark 16.5 inches here. So this line I'm marking over here is serving as our shoulder line. So after that, I'll go ahead and mark 1 inch for the zipper all the way down our waist length. So after marking the 1 inch all the way down, I'm going to go ahead and impute my shoulder measurement divided by 2, which is 8 inches. So I'll just go ahead and mark 8 inches here. Measure my armhole measurement divided by 2, which is also 8 inches. From the point I mark the shoulder measurement, I'll mark 8 inches. It's just your normal basic back pattern. So I'll go ahead and connect the lines. After which, I'll go ahead and determine the neck width that I'm working with. Remember, our front neck width is 3 inches. So I'll go ahead and also mark 3 inches for the back. Now for the back depth, I'll be working with 2 inches. So I'll go ahead and connect it to get our neck curve. I don't know if you can actually see through this check. So after that, at the armhole line, I'm going to come down for 1 inch for armhole slope, and I'm going to connect it to the neck area of our back piece. And I'm going to go ahead and divide the remaining one, which is 3.5 inches. So at the point I mark the 3.5, I'll be coming out by half of an inch. Join the half of an inch to this 1 inch slope that we have here already. I don't know if this line is visible. Now after that, I'm going to go ahead and divide our. So at this point, I didn't actually know the camera was not recording. So I just did the basic back pattern piece that you know, and that was just it. So I'm just going to go ahead and use this to cut out the lining piece of the back piece too, and I'll be attaching only one layer of stay to the back piece. Now it's also optional to attach the stay to your back piece. You can just go ahead and leave your back piece this way, but for me, I'll be attaching extra one layer stay to it. So that will be it for our back piece.